In school, a teacher poses a math question to John, who hesitantly answers, unsure how he got it. Despite this, the teacher affirms that he is correct. Later, John's father, Brad, bids him goodnight and suggests they play tennis if he wakes up early the next day. Confused, he asks John to check under his bed. The following day, John flies a drone in the forest, causing it to get stuck on a tree, prompting him to retrieve it. He comes across a man-made hole and eventually retrieves the drone, but hurts his arm in the process. Returning home, he swims in the pool to clean his wound, then observes his family from outside his bedroom before taking a pill and leaving. During breakfast, his parents inquire about his well-being, to which he responds tiredly, contradicting his appearance. John admits to taking the drone out and falsely claims he lost it, surprising Brad. John brings up the hole in the forest, and his parents believe it to be a bunker for emergencies, built over a month before the owners went bankrupt. Despite repeated concerns about his well-being, John insists he's fine, practicing tennis afterward. At home, he repeatedly throws a ball against the ceiling, irritating Lori, who tells him to stop. He offers to help her with a book, but she becomes angry, catching the ball and kissing his forehead before leaving. He continues throwing the ball cautiously and later observes their gardener, Charlie, weeding. Charlie explains the reasons for weeding and points out a garden spider. Later, John secretly manipulates Charlie's drink, and when Charlie collapses, he inserts packs in Charlie's pocket before walking away. That evening, John spends time with his friend, Peter. Peter asks about John's training and jokingly doubts his ability to succeed. John mentions that his family is well. Later, John checks on Lori and his parents and secretly sedates them. He then takes Brad's phone and transports him on a wheelbarrow. Elsewhere, a worried mother visits her daughter, Lily, who has been staying in her room. Lily shares her dream of being an invisible blue balloon in the sky. The mother mentions her father's blue car and his absence, but believes he will return. Lily stands up to dance, but her mother thinks she is lying, and she tells Lily a story. The next day, Lori wakes up in an unfamiliar room and wakes up her parents. Brad comforts her as they try to figure out the situation. They call for help when they realize John is missing. Meanwhile, John pretends to be his mother and tells Charlie not to come over. Then, he secretly uses his parents' money to buy a meal and listens to the sound of the sea on his phone. Paula, a friend of Anna's, visits to find her. John claims that the family left to visit their grandfather in the hospital, and Paula leaves a message for him. Later, John brings food to Anna and Brad in a bunker. They ask him for a rope to escape, but he only shows them the food he bought. Anna suspects that John is the suspect, but Brad doesn't believe it. John leaves after being instructed to get a ladder. The next day, John tells Peter that he bought a TV and that he should visit him. Meanwhile, John's family tries to escape the bunker without success. Lori becomes upset and eats the food that John brought, causing a dispute with Brad. Anna suggests they eat and starts drinking the water. Brad, fed up, returns the food to them. Lori, in desperation, snatches it, including the food that has fallen on the ground. Meanwhile, Brad sits opposite and eats. At the same time, John plays the piano until it rains, leaving his family shivering outside. The next day, John brings them their belongings. Anxious, Anna asks if someone is forcing him and hurting him. However, he remains silent and merely drops the bag filled with sweaters and blankets. Lori pleads with him to talk, but John departs. Later, he picks up Peter from the bus stop. On the way home, Peter admits he's afraid of John driving, so John teases him by speeding. When asked about his grandfather, John reveals he's still in the hospital. Out of curiosity, Peter asks if he ever attempted to drown himself. Shortly after, John does so in the pool with Peter holding him. Peter eventually lets go and claims he almost drowned but saw nothing. He then drowns himself while John holds him. After a while, Peter struggles but John keeps him under. Finally, Peter manages to emerge, coughing up water. Annoyed, John asks if he saw anything, to which Peter replies negatively. He then tells John about his friend seeing the Virgin Mary when he drowned himself. This prompts John to try drowning himself again. Later, the boys play video games while Lori takes a break. Brad hopes his friend, Oliver, will call the police, while Anna worries about Paula, who needs help with catering. Lori misses Josh, but Brad reminds her that she barely knows him. Meanwhile, Anna recounts a conversation where John asked her about adult life. She explains her uncertainty and shares her belief that one never stops being a child despite responsibilities. Simultaneously, John and Peter eat, but John becomes repulsed when Peter licks his spoon and puts it back in the jar. They squabble and chase each other until John spills his ice cream. After Peter apologizes, he asks what they should do with the remaining ice cream. In retaliation, John makes him eat it upside down. In the bunker, Anna, feeling devastated and hungry, eats a banana peel and cries. That night, Brad notices John flying a drone and urges him to leave them alone. The following morning, John drives Peter to the bus station but takes a detour to get cash. Upon withdrawing the money, he surprises Peter by handing it to him and confirming that he has an ATM card. Although he initially offers to buy something with the money, Peter asks to keep it instead and John agrees. Meanwhile, Lori and Brad playfully put mud on each other's faces, while Anna watches and also gets splashed. After seeing Peter off, John returns home and finds Paula inside. Despite her concerns about his family's prolonged absence, John assures her that he's fine and mentions the upcoming visit from a housekeeper. Even though Paula is unconvinced, she intends to leave, but John asks her to stay. With minimal time, Paula declines and tries to leave, but John persistently asks her to stay, even telling her that Anna is 50 years old. This leads to an uncomfortable conversation about age, after which Paula finally leaves. Later that evening, Paula's call to Anna's phone prompts her to realize that something is wrong. John explains that Anna left her phone behind, and Paula leaves in fear. Subsequently, Brad's persistent questioning annoys Anna, who denies that anything happened, although Brad remains unconvinced. Meanwhile, Lily's mother tells her that she is leaving and won't be coming back, leaving Lily surprised and worried. Despite Lily's efforts to convince her to stay, her mother departs, leaving Lily to fend for herself. Finally, one day, Paula brings police to John's house, but they find the doors locked and cannot enter. John, surprised, sneaks out of his room to avoid being seen. Later, he practices tennis with his coach, who expresses concern about John's readiness for the competition due to his mother not paying for coaching. The coach offers to help if John is struggling, but encourages him to keep training as the qualifiers are tough. John insists he's ready and promises to get his mother to pay the coach. In the bunker, Brad and Lori worry about John not bringing them food, suspecting he is trying to starve them. Meanwhile, John is found floating in the pool by Oliver, who mistakenly thinks John is drowning. John informs him that he's just playing and offers him a drink, but Oliver declines. The conversation ends with Oliver leaving John to cook risotto. The family, to pass the time, chants a tongue twister, which is interrupted when John appears. They plead for help, but John remains silent. Despite their distress, John eventually lowers food to them in a bucket using a rope, and then cuts the rope after his family takes the food. John joins his family for a meal. Brad drinks his favorite wine and John joins in. Despite telling his family about a personal achievement, they don't show interest. Later, John is upset and drives and walks alone. He returns to find his family sleeping and feels remorse. Lori notices his distress and thanks him for the meal he made. The family rush to rescue John when they find him floating in the pool. They later decide to fill the hole in the garden. The next day, Lily walks alone in the forest feeling similarly to John.